Never fall in love with these 6 types of men. Never fall in love with these 6 types of men. Because when you do, you don't just risk getting your heart broken, you risk losing yourself. Every woman, at some point in her life, meets a man who seems irresistible. He's charming, confident, mysterious. But over time, she realizes that what looked like strength was actually control, what looked like attention was manipulation, and what looked like love was just ego in disguise. You see, women often fall for the idea of a man, not the man himself. You fall for his potential, his pain, his charm, or the way he makes you feel needed. But love built on illusion always collapses. It's not because you're weak, naive, or foolish. It's because women love with depth, with emotion, and with hope. And sometimes, that hope blinds you from the truth that's standing right in front of you. This video is not about blaming you for loving the wrong man. It's about helping you recognize the patterns before they consume you. Because every heartbreak you've had wasn't just bad luck, it was a lesson disguised as pain. And once you understand these 6 types of men, you'll never waste your love on the wrong one again. There are men who enter your life like a storm, exciting, passionate, full of energy, but they leave destruction behind. There are others who appear calm and reliable, but underneath that silence hides emotional distance and cold indifference. And then there are the ones who keep you hooked with promises they never intend to fulfill. Each one drains a part of your emotional energy, piece by piece, until you start doubting your worth. But here's the truth. The way a man treats you is never about who you are. It's about who he is. When a man can't love you properly, it's not because you're not enough. It's because he's empty inside and he's trying to fill that emptiness with your affection. Yet no amount of love can fix a man who refuses to look at his own wounds. Maybe you've been with someone who made you question yourself all the time, who made you feel that you were too emotional, too demanding, or too sensitive. Maybe you tried to shrink yourself just to keep the peace. Maybe you thought, if I just love him harder, he'll finally see my value. But he never did. And the more you gave, the less he respected you. That's not love. That's emotional dependency disguised as devotion. This is why today's message matters. Because once you learn to identify these 6 types of men, you'll stop chasing potential and start demanding presence. You'll stop fighting to be chosen and start realizing that you are the prize. The woman who knows her worth no longer settles for a man who treats her as an option. And that's exactly where I want to take you in this journey. To that moment when your heart and your mind finally align, and you can say, I deserve better. The men we'll talk about are not villains. They are patterns. Each one reflects something deeper in the psychology of relationships. The emotional unavailable, the narcissist, the player, the victim, the controller, and the eternal boy who refuses to grow up. Understanding them is not about judgment. It's about protection. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. You stop falling for charm, for words, for temporary affection, and start seeing the truth behind the mask. And maybe as you listen, you'll recognize someone from your past, or even someone in your present. Don't ignore that instinct. Your intuition has always tried to warn you. You just learned to silence it in the name of love. But this time, you'll listen, because your peace is worth more than his potential. So take a deep breath. Open your heart, but keep your mind awake. Because from this moment on, you'll learn what kind of men you should never give your soul to again. There was a time when you believed that love could change anyone. You thought that patience, kindness, and loyalty were enough to heal a man's wounds. You believed that if you just stayed long enough, he would finally see how much you cared. That he would wake up one day, look at you, and realize you were the one. But he didn't. And what's worse, you stayed, hoping that he eventually would. You probably met him when you weren't even looking for love. Maybe you were rebuilding your life, finding your confidence again, and then he appeared. He was charming, attentive, maybe even a little broken. The kind of man who said all the right things but carried a quiet sadness that made you want to fix him. You told yourself he just needed understanding, that he had been hurt before, and that you could be different. You saw his potential, not his reality, and that's where everything began to fall apart. At first, he made you feel seen. He listened to your stories, complimented your laugh, sent good morning messages that made you smile. He talked about the future, hinted at commitment, and made you believe this time it was real. But slowly, without realizing it, you began to feel anxious. His attention started to fade. The texts became shorter. The warmth in his voice turned distant. And suddenly you found yourself chasing the same man who once chased you. You tried harder, You overthought every word, replayed every conversation, trying to understand what you did wrong. You doubted yourself, your body, your worth. You convinced yourself that if you were more patient, more understanding, more forgiving, he'd come back to how he was in the beginning. But the truth is, he was never that person. The man you fell in love with existed only in the first act, the one he used to make you fall. There's a psychological term for this pattern: intermittent reinforcement. It's when someone gives you affection inconsistently, sometimes full of love, sometimes cold and distant, and your brain gets addicted to the uncertainty. You start craving his attention the way a gambler craves the next win. You stop seeking love and start seeking relief. That's how toxic attachment is born. Not from hate, but from hope. And that's why some men become so hard to let go of. Not because they're extraordinary, but because they awaken a deep emotional addiction. One day they make you feel like you're the center of their world, and the next day you're invisible. They train you to accept crumbs by making those crumbs feel like a feast. You begin to measure love not by how peaceful it feels, but by how much chaos you can survive. You might remember nights lying awake, staring at your phone, waiting for a message that never came. The way your heart jumped every time it buzzed, only to be disappointed again. The arguments that always ended with you apologizing for something you didn't do. The silent treatment that made you question if you were too much or not enough. You became so used to emotional inconsistency that calmness now feels strange. And that's the moment many women get trapped, between the memory of who he was and the pain of who he became. You keep hoping the old version of him will come back, even though deep down you know he never will. You tell yourself, maybe if I wait a little longer. But time doesn't fix emotional immaturity. It only exposes it. When you love a man who's emotionally unavailable, narcissistic, controlling, or lost in his own ego, you end up carrying the weight of two people. You become the one who feels, who communicates, who forgives, who tries, while he simply exists. Love should never feel like begging for attention or walking on eggshells just to avoid conflict. It should never demand that you lose yourself to keep someone else comfortable. So many women confuse emotional intensity with emotional connection, but love is not supposed to hurt. If it costs you your peace, it's too expensive. And yet, society often romanticizes pain, telling you that real love is about endurance, about holding on no matter what. But sometimes the most powerful act of love is walking away. This is the truth most people don't want to hear. You cannot heal a man who refuses to heal himself. You can't love someone into maturity. You can't teach a man empathy, respect, or commitment. He either has the emotional foundation for it, or he doesn't. And if he doesn't, no amount of sacrifice will ever change that. Every time you try to save a man, you abandon yourself a little more. You trade your boundaries for his comfort, your dreams for his stability, your joy for his approval, until one day, you don't even recognize yourself in the mirror. You used to smile easily, laugh loudly, love freely, but now you're guarded, cautious, and tired. And it all started because you fell for a man who couldn't love you the way you needed. But here's the turning point, the moment of awakening, when you finally understand that the problem was never you, but the pattern you kept repeating. The pattern of falling for the same kind of man wearing a different face. That's when you break the cycle, because awareness is the first step to freedom. And once you see clearly, you stop trying to change others and start choosing differently. The first type of man you should never fall in love with is the emotionally unavailable man. He's the one who can make you feel everything and nothing at the same time. At first, he seems mysterious, quiet, introspective, deep. You mistake his emotional distance for depth. You think he's just guarded because he's been hurt. You tell yourself you'll be the one to make him open up, that your patience will melt his walls. But those walls are not protection. They are his comfort zone. He doesn't know how to love without control, and he doesn't want to. He'll give you just enough to keep you hoping, but never enough to make you feel secure. And the more you try to reach him, the further he retreats. Loving this man feels like running toward a door that never opens. Exhausting, confusing, and endlessly painful. You can't connect with someone who refuses to meet you halfway. The second type is the narcissist. This man is magnetic, confident, charming, persuasive. He knows how to make you feel like the most special person in the room. But soon, that charm becomes a weapon. Everything he gives comes with a price. His compliments turn into control, his affection into manipulation. You begin to notice that every conversation somehow revolves around him, his dreams, his pain, his opinions, and when you finally express your needs, he calls you dramatic, needy, or ungrateful. Narcissists love admiration, not intimacy. They crave validation, not connection. When you love one, you slowly disappear. You start doubting your reality because he twists every situation until you question your own perception. You end up apologizing for things you didn't do, just to keep the peace. And when you finally break, he'll say you're too emotional, when in truth, you were just exhausted from being invisible. The third type is the manipulator. He's a master of mixed signals. He knows exactly how to keep you close without ever committing. One day, he's affectionate and attentive. The next, cold and distant. He knows when to pull you in and when to push you away. This constant inconsistency keeps your mind trapped, replaying every word he says, trying to decode his intentions. The manipulator doesn't love you. He loves control. He feeds on your confusion because it keeps you emotionally dependent on his approval. You'll catch yourself saying things like, "He's not that bad when he wants to be," or, "Maybe I overreacted." That's how you know you've been conditioned. Real love brings clarity, not chaos. If you constantly feel anxious, uncertain, or guilty, it's not love. It's manipulation, dressed as passion. The fourth type is the victim. He always has a sad story, a reason why nothing is ever his fault. His ex was crazy. His boss was unfair. The world is always against him. You start to feel sorry for him. You become his therapist, his savior, his emotional anchor. But here's the truth. He doesn't want to get better. He wants attention, not accountability. You'll carry the burden of his problems, thinking that your love can fix him, but he'll only drain you until you have nothing left. Every time you try to set boundaries, he'll make you feel guilty. He'll say, "I thought you understood me," or "You're just like everyone else." He weaponizes his pain to keep you hooked. But relationships are not rehabilitation centers. You can support someone who's healing, but you cannot heal someone who refuses to take responsibility for his own life. The fifth type is the controller. He doesn't always start as controlling. Sometimes he hides behind the mask of protection. He'll say he just wants what's best for you, that he cares too much, that other men don't deserve you. Slowly, he starts isolating you from friends, criticizing your choices, questioning your every move. He'll make you feel guilty for wanting independence, accusing you of not caring enough. And by the time you realize what's happening, you've already lost parts of your freedom. The controller confuses love with possession. He doesn't want a partner. He wants power. And the more you give in to his control, the smaller you become. Until one day, you realize that love should never require you to ask permission to be yourself. The sixth and final type is the eternal boy, the man who refuses to grow up. He's fun, spontaneous, full of charm, and maybe that's what attracts you at first. He lives for the moment, avoids responsibility, and always has an excuse for why he's not ready. You think his playful nature is refreshing, but over time it becomes exhausting. You're the one making plans, paying bills, solving problems, while he drifts through life like a teenager in a man's body. You hope he'll change when he's ready, but readiness never comes. Emotional maturity doesn't appear overnight. It's built through discipline, reflection, and accountability, all of which he avoids. Loving him feels like raising him. You become his mother, not his partner. And nothing kills attraction faster than becoming responsible for the man you were supposed to lean on. When you look at these six types, the emotionally unavailable, the narcissist, the manipulator, the victim, the controller, and the eternal boy, you start to see a pattern. They all take more than they give. They all drain your energy, your confidence, your light. They all teach you the same painful lesson, that love without respect is just attachment, and attention without consistency is just manipulation. You cannot build peace in a relationship that thrives on chaos. But here's something important. It's not enough to recognize these men. You must also understand why you attract them, because sometimes attraction is not about chemistry, it's about familiarity. You might be drawn to men who feel like home, even if home was full of instability, silence, or emotional distance. That's not love. That's unhealed trauma choosing comfort over growth. Healing means reprogramming what your heart perceives as safe. It means no longer confusing intensity with connection or drama with love. When you finally break the pattern, you stop falling for potential and start demanding partnership. You stop saying, "Maybe he'll change," and start saying, "I deserve better now." You stop seeing red flags as challenges to overcome and start seeing them as signals to walk away. Because the truth is, love should never make you lose yourself. The right man will never make you question your worth. He'll remind you of it daily. And when that happens, when you've healed, grown, and learned to value peace over passion, you'll look back and thank every mistake, every heartbreak, every wrong man for teaching you exactly what love is not. Because that's how women become powerful. Not by never falling, but by never falling the same way twice. Every time you ignore the red flags, you teach your heart that pain is normal. You convince yourself that love is supposed to hurt a little, that every relationship has ups and downs, and that if you just hold on long enough, things will get better. But the truth is, the longer you stay with the wrong man, the more disconnected you become from yourself. It's not just your confidence that fades, it's your sense of who you are. When you stay with an emotionally unavailable man, you learn to silence your needs. You start believing that asking for consistency is being too demanding. You become the woman who apologizes for wanting attention, who justifies neglect as independence. And slowly, you lose your voice. You begin to think that love means waiting. Waiting for him to text, waiting for him to change, waiting for him to care. But waiting is not love. It's self-abandonment disguised as hope. When you love a narcissist, you lose your reflection. You start seeing yourself through his distorted lens. Never enough, always wrong, always the problem. You forget what peace feels like because you're constantly defending yourself. He builds you up only to tear you down over and over until you no longer trust your own emotions. And the worst part? You begin to crave his approval, even though you know it's toxic. That's how manipulation works. It makes you addicted to the very thing that destroys you. When you love a manipulator, your world becomes small. You start to doubt your friends, your family, even your own memories. Because he's trained you to question everything except him. You stop recognizing manipulation as abuse because it's subtle. It comes wrapped in affection, apologies, and promises that things will change. But they never do. And by the time you realize it, your energy is gone. You're emotionally drained, and you don't even know who you can trust anymore. When you fall for the victim, you inherit his chaos. You become his emotional caretaker, constantly fixing, rescuing, and forgiving. You stop living your own life because you're too busy managing his. And no matter how much you do, it's never enough. Because his pain is his identity. And if he heals, he loses control. So he keeps you trapped in a cycle of guilt, using your empathy against you. Loving him feels noble, but it's just another form of self-sacrifice. And eventually, you wake up realizing you've been mothering a man instead of being loved by one. When you give yourself to the controller, you trade your freedom for security. He convinces you that his control is love, that his jealousy is protection. You stop dressing the way you like, seeing the people you care about, doing the things that make you happy. You live under invisible rules, constantly anxious about saying or doing the wrong thing. He isolates you until he's all you have left. And then, he becomes your world, a world built on fear, not affection. Love should make you feel safe, not trapped. And when you stay with the eternal boy, you spend years waiting for a man who never arrives. You plan your future while he lives in the moment. You take responsibility for everything while he takes nothing seriously. You become his stability while he remains your chaos. He says he loves you, but love without maturity is just emotion without structure. You end up parenting a partner, and no woman should ever have to raise the man she's dating. But here's what's truly dangerous about staying in these relationships. You start normalizing emotional neglect. You start thinking, maybe this is just how love is. And once you believe that, you stop demanding better. You stop believing that peace, stability, and reciprocity are possible. You start accepting the bare minimum as if it were something special. That's how good women end up trapped in bad love. Not because they don't know their worth, but because they forget it along the way. There's also a biological element that makes this even harder. Every time you go through a cycle of rejection and reconciliation with the same man, your brain releases dopamine and oxytocin, the same chemicals involved in addiction. That's why you feel addicted to him. It's not just emotional, it's chemical. You crave him even when you know he's not good for you. That's why leaving feels like withdrawal. It's not weakness, it's neuroscience. But like every addiction, the longer you feed it, the stronger it becomes. And here's the ultimate cost. When you keep loving the wrong men, you start losing faith in love itself. You become guarded, suspicious, closed off. You tell yourself that love is dangerous, that caring too much only leads to pain. You build walls so high that even the right man won't be able to reach you. You start confusing solitude with safety, independence with isolation, and even though you look fine on the outside, deep down, you carry the silent ache of someone who once gave everything and got nothing in return. But that doesn't have to be your story anymore. The pain you've been through is not your identity, it's your initiation. It's the lesson life gives to those who love deeply. You were not foolish for loving, you were brave. You just loved men who didn't know how to receive it, but now you know better. And knowing better means doing better. The moment you choose yourself over your patterns, everything changes. So ask yourself, how many more chances will you give to someone who's already shown you who they are? How many more sleepless nights will you spend waiting for a message that won't come? How many more times will you confuse anxiety with passion or guilt with love? Because every time you say, just one more chance, you delay your own healing. There comes a moment when silence becomes power, when you stop explaining, stop chasing, stop begging. That's when you reclaim your strength. Because the truth is, no man can truly love you until you love yourself enough to walk away. And once you do, the kind of peace that follows will feel unfamiliar, but it will also feel like home. Healing doesn't start the moment you walk away from the wrong man. It starts the moment you decide you won't go back. It starts the moment you stop calling it love when it's really confusion. The moment you stop romanticizing pain. The moment you realize that being alone is not loneliness and it's freedom from chaos. That's where the real transformation begins. Because deep down, every woman knows when something isn't right. You can feel it in your body long before your mind admits it. The tension in your chest, the anxiety before seeing his name appear on your phone, the exhaustion that comes from explaining the same thing over and over. Those are not the signs of love. They are the symptoms of emotional starvation. And once you name it, once you stop pretending it's normal, you begin to heal. Healing doesn't mean you stop loving him. It means you start loving yourself more. It means you stop blaming yourself for not being enough for someone who was never ready. It means you understand that closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from your acceptance. Acceptance that some stories don't end the way you wanted, but exactly the way you needed. Because pain is not the opposite of love. It's the lesson that teaches you what love should never feel like. There's a version of you waiting on the other side of this pain. Stronger, wiser, calmer. A woman who no longer chases potential, who no longer confuses effort with value. A woman who walks away at the first sign of disrespect because she finally understands that peace is the highest form of love. That woman is not a fantasy. She's you, once you decide you've had enough. And one day when you meet a man who truly values you, it won't feel like fireworks or chaos. It'll feel like exhaling after years of holding your breath. It'll feel calm, safe, simple. You won't question his intentions because his consistency will speak louder than his words. You won't feel anxious waiting for a text because he'll show up without being asked. You won't need to compete for his attention because he'll give it freely. That's what healthy love feels like. Not intensity, but peace. But you'll never get to that love if you keep returning to the ones who hurt you. Because every time you go back, you tell the universe you're willing to settle. You teach your heart to accept less than it deserves. You delay the life, the love, and the peace that could be yours. The universe can't deliver what you keep making excuses for. So when you finally close that door, truly close it, everything changes. That's when the right energy finds you. That's when your healing attracts what's meant for you. So stop romanticizing the men who broke you. Stop remembering only the good moments and forgetting the nights you cried yourself to sleep. Stop replaying the what ifs and start embracing the what's next. Because what's next is a life where you no longer beg to be understood, where you no longer shrink to fit someone else's comfort, where you no longer confuse chaos with connection. What's next is peace, the kind that doesn't depend on anyone else. And here's something powerful to remember. You don't need closure from him. You are the closure. The moment you stop chasing explanations and start choosing silence, you take your power back. Because silence speaks louder than any text, any argument, any desperate attempt to be heard. Silence says, I understand now. Silence says, you no longer have access to me. Silence says, I choose myself. You owe it to yourself to stop rewriting the same story. You've done the hard part. You loved. You cared. You tried. That's nothing to be ashamed of. It means you have a heart capable of depth, empathy, and passion. But now, that same heart deserves to be treated with the same love it gives. Don't waste another year trying to teach someone how to love you. Save that energy for someone who already knows how. So if you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in any of these words, promise yourself one thing: no more almosts. No more waiting for someone to change. No more convincing someone to stay. From now on, love must feel like peace, not anxiety. Love must make you stronger, not smaller. Love must add to your life, not drain it. Anything less is not love. It's a lesson. And when you finally understand that, you'll realize something powerful. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. From this moment forward, you no longer chase, you no longer beg, you no longer prove. You simply receive, because you are no longer the woman who falls for potential. You are the woman who recognizes her worth and walks away when it's not being honored.